10 years, a decade of my life spent in this rattling metal box, smelling of antiseptic stale coffee, and occasionally the faint, coppery tang of blood you can never quite scrub out. You learn to build a wall around yourself in this job. Not with bricks and mortar, but with a thick plaster of gallows humor, procedural detachment, and the kind of cynicism that would make a philosopher blush. It's not about being heartless, it's about survival. You either become a rock or you get washed away by the tide of human misery. My partner, Priya, she's still got that shine in her eyes. 6 months in, bless her heart, she still thinks we're knights in shining armor. I'm just the guy who drives the armor, and most days it feels more like a garbage truck. Quiet night, she said, trying to jinx us. She was cleaning the monitor screen with a wipe, a little ritual of hers. Don't say the Q word, I mumbled, not even looking up from the crossword puzzle I'd been torturing for an hour. You'll summon the crazies, you know the rules. She just smiled. Come on, Gus, it's a Tuesday, what's the worst that could happen? Another college kid drinks too much Fireball and thinks he can fly. Well, I'd take that. At least it's straightforward. I was about to tell her about the time we had to extricate a guy from a tuba when the radio crackled, slicing through the quiet. The dispatcher's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, just like ours is supposed to be. Ambulance 14, respond to a 10 minutes 50 pi single vehicle versus pole, intersection of Oak and 7th. Police and fire en route. 10 minutes 50 pi, personal injury, the bread and butter of our miserable profession. I tossed the crumpled newspaper onto the passenger seat, the half-finished puzzle forgotten. I turned the key and the diesel engine roared to life. Just another call, just another Tuesday, or so I thought. We were the first medical unit on scene. The night was painted in the strobing red and blue of our own lights, reflecting off the wet asphalt. It's a canvas I know too well. A blue minivan, the kind that probably has crushed goldfish crackers permanently embedded in the carpet, had made a very intimate acquaintance with a telephone pole. The physics were simple and brutal. My professional brain started its checklist before my feet even hit the pavement. Single vehicle, major front-end damage, airbags deployed. One subject outside the vehicle, ambulatory. The ambulatory subject was a man in a rumpled business suit, leaning against a patrol car that had just pulled up. He was yelling something slurred and incoherent about his rights and his very important meeting tomorrow. The stench of whiskey hung around him like a cheap cologne. Priya, you got the idiot, I said over my shoulder. I'll take the van. She nodded, her face set in that determined, slightly nervous look she gets. I crunched over a field of shattered safety glass, my boots grinding it into a fine powder. The driver's side door was jammed shut, so I went around to the passenger side. It groaned open. The first thing that hit me wasn't a smell, but the silence inside the cabin. A profound, heavy silence that the drunk's yelling couldn't penetrate. A woman was in the driver's seat. A leaner, I'd learn later, she was just sitting there, staring straight ahead at the spider-webbed windshield. Her hands were in her lap, no, not in her lap, they were holding something. My eyes followed her arms down to the small bundle she was cradling. A little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, wearing a dinosaur hoodie. The child restraint system was in the back seat, empty. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. He'd been in the front. I leaned in, my training taking over. Ma'am, my name is Gus. Well, I'm a paramedic. No response. I reached past her to check the boy. It was a formality. The angle of his head was all wrong, a grotesque tilt that screamed cervical fracture. No pulse. No respiration, pupils fixed and dilated. He was gone, instantly. My brain logged the information, pediatric DOA, probable C-spine injury secondary to airbag deployment. Time to start the protocol, time to say the words. I gently touched her shoulder. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. That's when she moved. Her head turned slowly and she looked right at me. Her eyes weren't filled with tears or panic. They were voids, empty. Then her hand shot out and clamped onto my wrist. Her grip was like iron. Please, she whispered. The word had no inflection. It wasn't a plea, it was a command from a broken universe. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. Just make him breathe again, just once. And in that moment, the wall I'd spent 10 years building didn't just crack. It turned to dust. It wasn't the tragedy. I'm paid to deal in tragedy. It was her stillness. The absolute, unshakable, insane sincerity of her request. It wasn't a mother grieving. It was a person demanding I reverse the laws of nature. And for one horrifying second, my battle-hardened, cynical brain actually considered how. My mouth opened, but the standard script had been wiped clean from my mental teleprompter. All the prepackaged phrases, we're doing everything we can. I understand this is difficult. I'm so sorry for your loss. They all felt like a foreign language, like cheap, flimsy lies. My tongue felt thick, useless, a lump of dead meat in my mouth. I was just staring at her, at the impossible grip she had on my arm, my mind a roaring, empty static. Then the details started flooding in, sharp and overwhelming, as if my senses had been dialed up to 11. The air freshener. It was one of those little cardboard pine trees, the cheap green kind, dangling from the rearview mirror. The scent of artificial forest filled the small space, a cloying, sickening sweetness that mixed with the faint metallic odor of the deployed airbag. It was the smell of a futile attempt to make something sterile and unpleasant feel fresh. It was an insult, it was suffocating. My eyes darted around the cabin, desperately trying to find an anchor in the storm raging in my head. A crayon drawing of a rainbow was taped to the dashboard, the colors smeared and childishly vibrant against the drab gray plastic. A symbol of hope and innocence, now the backdrop to this silent, private apocalypse. A sippy cup with a cracked dinosaur lid lay on the floor mat, a small puddle of what looked like apple juice slowly soaking into the fabric. I found myself fixated on it, on the tiny, mundane tragedy of a spilled drink. These weren't just objects, they were shrapnel from a life, a happy little universe that had ceased to exist about 7 minutes ago. And then she started humming. It was a low, tuneless sound, a broken melody that didn't seem to have a beginning or an end. A lullaby, maybe. Worse, she began to rock, a gentle, rhythmic back-and-forth motion. She was rocking her dead child. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, so contrary to the laws of biology and grief as I understood them, that my brain simply refused to process it. The sound of her humming vibrated through her hand, up my arm, and settled deep in my chest, a cold, heavy stone. Every hum, every gentle rock was a fresh wave of something, not sadness. It was bigger and uglier than that. It was a profound sense of cosmic wrongness. "Gus, you good?" Priya's voice cut through the fog. She was at the passenger door, her eyes wide. She'd finished with the drunk and was looking at me, then at the woman, then back at me with an expression of deep concern. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. "Yeah," I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. "I'm fine, get the sheet." She flinched at my tone. I felt a hot flash of anger at her for interrupting my private meltdown, at the mother for not letting go of my arm, at the goddamn pine tree air freshener, at myself for being so completely, utterly useless. "What the hell is wrong with me?" my mind screamed. "This is routine, code black, pronounce console, clear the scene, why can't I move? Why does my throat feel like it's full of concrete?" I tried to gently disengage my wrist from Alina's grip. "Ma'am, we need to." Her fingers tightened, her knuckles white, the humming stopped. She looked at me again, her eyes focusing on my face for the first time, really seeing me. "You can fix him," she stated, not as a question but as a simple fact I was too stupid to grasp. "That's your job." The accusation in her voice, quiet as it was, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just grief talking, it was a judgment. It stripped away my uniform, my title, my decade of calloused experience, and left me as just a man who was failing at the one thing this woman believed he existed to do. The anger in my chest curdled into a cold, nauseating dread. Something was breaking inside me, a seal I didn't even know was there, and I had no idea what was about to come pouring out. I felt like I was losing my mind, right there in the front seat of a wrecked minivan that smelled like pine trees and death. I was drowning. The sounds of the scene, the crackle of police radios, the distant rumble of the arriving fire engine, Priya's hesitant questions, all faded into a dull, underwater roar. The only thing that was real was the pressure of Alina's fingers on my wrist and the weight of her impossible expectation. Then a hand landed on my shoulder. It was heavy and familiar. I flinched, pulling my head out of the van's suffocating bubble of grief. It was Dave, a fire captain I'd known since my rookie days. His face was a roadmap of bad calls and long nights, etched with a kind of weary competence that I'd always tried to emulate. He didn't say anything to me at first, he just looked past me into the van. He took in the scene with a single, practiced glance, the mother, the child, the look on my face. He'd seen this movie 100 times. "All right, Gus, let's give her some space," he said, his voice low and calm, the perfect antidote to the chaos in my head. He and another firefighter gently began to work on the jammed driver's side door with a pry bar. I stumbled back from the passenger side, finally free from Alina's grip, and leaned against the side of the ambulance, sucking in the cool night air. It tasted clean after the synthetic pine. Priya was there, holding a white sheet, her face pale. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I'm fine," I lied. Dave walked over, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He stood beside me, watching his crew work. We stood in silence for a moment, the comfortable silence of two veterans who didn't need to fill the air with bullshit. He finally shook his head, looking at the twisted blue metal of the minivan. "Damn shame," he grunted. Then he said the words that changed everything. "This is a weird one, Gus. Gives me the creeps. Reminds me of that wreck we worked, 10 years ago, out on A-5, you remember, the one with that damn blue pickup truck." The world stopped, A-5. A blue pickup truck. The name of the road, the color of the vehicle, it was like he'd spoken a magic incantation, a key turning in a lock deep inside my memory that I had sealed with rust and forgetting. Suddenly, I wasn't on the corner of Oak and 7th anymore. I was 22 years old, green as grass, the paramedic patch on my sleeve still stiff and new. It was a scorching summer afternoon. A blue Ford F-150 had rolled 3 times, and inside a young mother not much older than I was holding her baby. The car seat hadn't been strapped in right. It was my third or fourth pediatric code, and I froze. For a full 10 seconds, maybe more, I just stood there staring. My training, my protocols, everything evaporated in the face of that silent, awful tableau. My preceptor had to literally shove me forward to get me to act. It was too late, of course. The baby was long gone, but those 10 seconds of useless, panic paralysis have haunted me ever since. I buried them. I buried them under a decade of jokes, of cynicism, of forced indifference. I never told a soul. Yeah, Dave continued, oblivious to the bomb he'd just detonated in my psyche. That kid's mom said the exact same thing this one did. Something about making him breathe again. Weird, huh? Anyway, let's get this cleaned up. He clapped me on the shoulder again and walked away. But I was still there 10 years ago on the hot asphalt of a -5, a useless kid in a uniform that felt 2 sizes too big. It all clicked into place. The pieces of my bizarre, overwhelming reaction to Alina weren't random. They were echoes. The cloying air freshener, the mother's unnatural calm, her impossible request, it wasn't a new trauma. It was a ghost. It was the ghost of that call on a -5, the one I had sworn to forget, rising from its shallow grave. My professionalism, my cynical armor, my reputation as the unflappable veteran, it was all a lie. It was a fortress I had built brick by painful brick, not to protect myself from the daily horrors of the job, but to wall off one specific memory, the memory of my own failure. My 10 seconds of freezing weren't just a rookie mistake. In the dark recesses of my mind, they had festered into a cardinal sin. I hadn't just been incompetent, I had been a coward. And I'd spent the next 10 years overcompensating, becoming the iciest, most detached paramedic I could be, just so I would never have to feel that helpless terror again. Alina hadn't broken me. She had simply held up a mirror, and in her face, I saw the reflection of a grief I had failed to properly witness a decade ago. In her impossible request, I heard the echo of a plea I had been unable to answer. She wasn't just another victim, she was my penance. The rest of the call was a blur. I moved on autopilot, my body going through the motions my mind was no longer capable of directing. I watched as the firefighters finally got Alina out of the car. I saw her collapse into the arms of a police officer, the dam of her composure finally breaking into a storm of silent, body-racking sobs. I filled out the paperwork, my handwriting steady, my report concise and clinical. I was a perfect machine on the outside, inside I was rubble. Back at the station, the fluorescent lights of the break room felt painfully bright. Plea was talking to me, I think. Asking if I wanted coffee, I just shook my head and walked past her into the small, windowless quiet room where we're supposed to go to decompress. I'd never used it before. I always thought it was for rookies. I locked the door and sat down on the worn-out vinyl couch. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just started to shake. A deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my hands and spread through my entire body. It was the physical manifestation of a decade of suppressed fear and guilt finally breaking free. I wasn't burned out, I was haunted. And the ghost wasn't some patient I couldn't save. It was the ghost of the terrified, useless kid I used to be. The kid I thought I had buried under a mountain of experience, but who had been there all along, waiting. I sat there for what felt like hours, just shaking in the silence. Then, with a hand that still trembled, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, past names of colleagues and friends, to a number I had saved years ago on the recommendation of HR and had never once thought I'd need. The 24/7 first responder mental health support line. My finger hovered over the screen, the wall was gone, there was nothing left to hide behind. Update 1. A lot of you in the comments are asking what happened to the drunk driver. The system did its thing. He got arrested, posted bail the next morning, and his lawyer will probably get it pleaded down to a lesser charge. He might do a few years, he might do less. That's the infuriating, predictable, soul-crushing reality of it. A life is gone, and the consequence is a neat and tidy legal process. Don't ask me how I feel about it. My feelings don't change a damn thing. Update 2. Wow, I didn't expect this to blow up. Thank you everyone for the messages and the awards. I'm reading through the comments, especially from other medics, nurses, and firefighters, and it helps a lot. Just knowing I'm not the only one with a ghost from a past call riding shotgun. I took the week off. And yeah, for those asking, I made the call, talked for a long time. It felt like lancing a boil that's been festering for 10 years. It hurt like hell, but at least the poison is finally starting to drain out. Thank you, seriously.